it's time to. All right. Well, welcome everybody from those of you online and those of you here in the audience at E-Free Church. We enjoy having both the online and the in-person audience, and we're blessed this evening to have Brian Lauer as tonight's speaker in our Faith and Science series. And before we get started, I would like to spend a moment in prayer, and then we'll be able to hear from Brian. So let's just turn to the Lord. We're so thankful, Lord, that you've provided resources in so many ways so that we can communicate your truths to those here and online. Well, your word is truth, and that's what we're upholding by the various means and various speakers that participate. We pray tonight for Brian as he presents the information that he has prepared. Pray that it would resonate with those of us who hear, and that we would be bold to take action to perpetuate your truth into the world around us, especially the schools. So we ask your blessing upon this time and look forward to what Brian has to share with us. And thank you, Jesus, as we pray in your name. Amen. So Brian Lauer, director of the Solidify Your Faith ministry. He's a speaker, a creation evangelist, and sometimes a challenger of the status quo, especially in science and education. Brian is from St. Cloud, Minnesota, and has given creation and freedom talks from Minnesota to Florida at churches, schools, colleges, conferences, camps, and clubs. Brian will be speaking on the topic, the battle for our minds, with a special emphasis on the curriculum in our schools. Welcome, Brian.
All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out today and for your interest in errors in our textbooks. And I just want to start by, I got something knocked off my bucket list, and I didn't even know it was on the bucket list. I went out to Broken Bow, Nebraska, and I went to the Boneyard Museum, and I was so impressed. It is so well done. The signage is so professional, the research is so thorough, and the exhibits were just first class. I think everybody should have this on their bucket list. Go there several times a year, and they are looking for volunteers. They're open 3 days a week, and what a shame. That thing should be open 5 days a week for sure. And so if you can fit that into the schedule, I think it'll be a tremendous blessing for you to help people see that perspective of the past. Because, you know, there's two perspectives. There's one perspective of the past that's blind chance. You know, that's like thinking this computer got put together by blind chance. That's pretty absurd, right? How much more absurd to think our bodies got put together by chance. And so there's another perspective, but let's take a look at the history. They wanted me to touch on how did we get to this point, the history, and that's the first thing you start with. They got this at the museum in Broken Bow. They've got this audio tour, and you can go through and listen to everything, and it's so well done. And then, you know, I can take an hour or so and then go back and then read the things that you weren't able to read, and you could spend easily a couple hours there. I took 200 pictures there, and I'm going to show you a couple of them tonight. But this is one of them, the Science Hall of Fame. You know, I was in a classroom one time and they said, do you believe in God or science? Or do you believe in the Bible or science? And I said, the Bible and science go hand in glove. But that Bible and evolution bang heads, because evolution's not science. And I was able to share with them that the people who brought us science were creationists. You know, you got people like Pasteur and Newton and Kepler and Boyle and Babbage and Faraday. And way down at the bottom, you got Matthew Murray. You know, he discovered the ocean currents because of the Bible. The Bible said there were paths in the sea, and he thought, well, if God said that there's paths in the seas, I'm going to find them. And he did. And he saves the shipping industry billions of dollars, you know. And that's because they were able to go wherever they wanted. But that's not happening in our classes. And we kind of started to go off the rails with James Hutton. And he had a medical degree, and he came up with uniformitarianism. This is from the Smithsonian, the blasphemous geologist who rocked our understanding of Earth's age. And he never became famous, but he had a big impact on geologist Charles Lyell, who had a law degree, and biologist Charles Darwin, who had a theology degree. And they grasped the importance of his works, but his influence endures today. And that's sad because it is wrong. He came up with uniformitarianism, where the present is the key to the past, and it's been guiding principle in geology and all sciences since. And it's wrong. Just look at Mount St. Helens. That destroyed uniformitarianism. Just look at how everything was laid down. That wasn't present processes. That was a catastrophe. And it goes on to say that his first book, Principles of Geology, was published almost 200 years ago. So we've been off the rails for almost 200 years. And now we take for granted that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Yeah, if you work for the Smithsonian, you better take that for granted, or you're not going to have a job for very long. And it had a big influence on Darwin. He said, only by realizing there could be an immense amount of time could evolution produce the diversities of species. So that big, immense amount of time. So what they had applied to geology, Darwin applies it to biology. And this is Charles Lyell's hidden agenda, to free science from Moses. Yeah, what a problem that is, you know. They just wanted to get rid of the Bible. That's what's happening. And that led us to Darwin. He wrote The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. And there's a subtitle for that which nobody quotes. It's Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That's right, favored races. Who's the favored race, Charles? Well, he says at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races. So who's the civilized one? You know, like him, the Europeans. Who's the savage ones? The Africans, the Aborigines in Australia. And you can see the slippery slope. Twin Cities Creation Science Association has a YouTube channel, and Dr. Cazell, he did a talk on there just a month or so ago about from Darwin to dictatorship. And beliefs have consequences. And when you reject the Creator, there can be some bad consequences. And you can't go through history and evolution without talking about Nebraska Man when you're in Nebraska, right? And so that all started because William Jennings Bryan, he wrote a piece for the New York Times, God and Evolution, charged that American teachers of Darwinism make the Bible a scrap of paper. So Darwinism just makes the Bible worthless. And there's some books on my table in the back, just high-quality books. That's what this image is from, his high-quality books. He came out with 3 books this fall and 6 videos, and you can get those at thegrandexperiment.com, I believe. But he wrote this piece, and then he called out the president at the New York Museum of Natural History. I think his name was Osborne. And so he didn't like it. It's like, what's this creationist calling me out? So now there's a big debate on the national stage. New York Times, creation versus evolution. And lo and behold, here comes a tooth from Nebraska. And they claim it's the Nebraska Man. And if you want to dive in more deeper on that, we do Creation Science 104. That was evolution frauds and evolution falsified and frauds. You can see that on my YouTube channel. And Dr. Carl Werner, he says, calling a tooth an ape-man tooth when it's a pig tooth, that's not fraud. That's a mistake. He says, but what is fraud is lying about when you found it. They said they found it last year, but they found it 5 years ago, actually. And then they also hid the jaw of a pig that had those tooths in it from 7 years before. And they even wrote about it. They say, be careful, these teeth look like human teeth, be careful. But they didn't, that was all suppressed. So that's fraud, 2 of them there. And then they had the Scopes monkey trial, which was broadcast across the world. And that's when they lost the case, the evolutionists did, but they won the case of public opinion. They thought, you have to be scientific to believe it. You can't be, it was bad. But that's another talk for another time. You came to hear about errors in the textbooks. So let's dive into that, okay? Because first you have to define the terms in this. What is science? Glenn Collins, he was at Ohio State, and he was in a big room full of physicists, and he asks, hey, what's the difference between science and science fiction? And they couldn't answer it. And so we're going to use the definition that's in our textbooks. According to the National Academy of Sciences, defines science as the use of evidence to construct testable explanations and predictions of natural phenomena, as well as the knowledge generated through this process. So it has to be testable. If it's not testable, it's not science. Keep that in mind. And what's evolution? We're not talking about big dogs or little dogs. We're talking about, all life on Earth is related to a common ancestor that existed about 3.8 billion years ago. This process is called evolution. So evolution is from molecules to man. It's everything. That one living cell turns into everything else. That's what we mean by evolution. And I like this video from the textbook. It says, we do not know exactly how or when the first forms of life developed. Well, they better tell that to the video people that's out there. They don't know how or when, right? They admit it. They don't know how or when. And so I encourage students to ask class, say, how did life begin? And if the teacher tries to snow job you, then you just say, well, say that they did produce life. You say, well, then why is there still $10 million on the table? Because that's available to anybody who can produce the first living cell. How do you get that information in the DNA into the cell? How does that replicate? And so $10 million is there. And so if you want to make some money, go into evo2.org and have at it. And good luck. And this is our college textbook. You can see it on my table there, trying to explain how life began. It said somehow, despite this harsh environment, living organisms appeared. Somehow it's not science. That's not observation and testing. And going back to the curriculum, this video called Evolution says every representative form ever known, from every known phyla on Earth evolved in the ocean. In the ocean. Everything. Is that testable? No, that's not science. And then it says that if you trace the history of water back billions of years, it is likely that water provided the liquid environment for life to begin. So life starts in water, but again, that's not testable. And this video says, you probably figured out that water equals life. It's like, what? Water equals life? How do you define life? So I go into another video. Minimal definition of life is that the system has the ability to replicate itself. Can water replicate itself? Is that growing? Is that reproducing? No, water is not life. So that's false statement number one. Okay, and this video says the chemicals, the raw ingredients that make up life were constantly sloshing around, bumping into each other, and combining into new chemistry. Over millions of years, again, that's not testable, that process can lead to living organisms. No, it can't, according to Dr. Jonathan Sarfati. And he's a chess master. He's brilliant. He could play 12 games of chess blindfolded and win. Just brilliant. But what does he have to say about life starting in water?
We're taught that chemical evolution started in the oceans, but you say that's the last place you'd expect to look. Why?
Well, okay, to build up a big molecule called a polymer from many little molecules called monomers, for instance, proteins from amino acids and DNA or RNA from the nucleotide building blocks, every step of the way, every combination spits out a water molecule. They call that condensation. But if you already have water molecules dissolving these things, then the water would come back and actually break that bond apart. It's called hydrolysis. So if you try to do this in water, it's the hydrolysis, the breaking apart that would happen and not the forming. In fact, chemists who want to make proteins or DNA or RNA, they exclude water as much as they can. They even have water absorbing chemicals to draw out the water. So a primordial ocean is the last place I'd expect to find these polymers forming.
Yeah, contrary to what the textbook says. And this one says there's a number of theories that attempt to explain the origin of life on Earth. The one with perhaps the most scientific support is sometimes called the prebiotic soup theory. So again, this is the best of the best. This is what they got, and this is what they say. And these compounds can then be dissolved in the oceans of the early Earth, and in the oceans they get transported all over the place. They end up interacting with each other, forming more and more complex molecules. They start to have this ability to replicate. No, it can't. The water breaks apart those molecules faster than they get put together. And don't believe me, listen to a NASA scientist. And this is a 2-minute clip. I'm just showing you the half of it, the past half, because she dodged the question at first. And the moderator, to his credit, brings her back on task.
I think the question is, it posits that water is a challenge for prebiotic evolution, that because it attacks the various molecules involved.
So In some of the prebiotic, thanks, this is something that people think about. Hydration and dehydration reactions are really important in prebiotic chemistry. And so postulating that life could evolve when there is no opportunity for an environmental separation to allow dehydration reactions actually is a problem, and people do address that. And whether it's, you need a continent, which some people, like couldn't evolve until we had land so we could get away from the water, or there's other ways to separate it. There can be phase separation with ice and water. There can be a variety of other ways that you can get dehydration reactions. And so I think that is very important and recognized.
It's not recognized.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not recognized in the textbooks, that's for sure. And so that was the question, why isn't it recognized? And she dodged it, and she still thinks it is, but it's not in the textbooks, trust me. And if you want to see the whole thing, go into rsr.org, that stands for Real Science Radio. That's my favorite website. I listen to that all the way down here. Just love it. And rsr.org/NASA-water. And that's going to, you'll enjoy that. And this video says over millions of years, and we talked about that can lead to living organisms. That's false statement number 2. And I'm not sure if we have a little echo in here or not. It just seems a little bit. And then this video says only 1.6% genetic difference between humans and chimpanzees. And this was wrong 20 years ago. In 2002, PubMed said divergence between samples of chimpanzees and human DNA sequence is 5%. And the difference between 5% and 1.6% is over 100 million base pairs. So that's a huge difference. And it goes on and says, yeah, that's probably wrong. And then this Nature in 2010 said the fickle Y chromosome, the common chimp and human chromosomes are horrendously different from each other. Horrendously different. That's not 1.6%. Horrendously different. So what is that? And thank God we've got this Jeffrey Tompkins. He's got a PhD in genetics from the University of Clemson. And you can see this in the AnswersResearchJournal.org. And how different are we? It says only 69% of the chimpanzee X chromosome was similar to human, and only 43% of the Y chromosome. That's horrendously different. So we're 57%, not 1.6%. And then this genome-wide, only 70% of the chimpanzee DNA was similar to human under the most optimum sequence slice conditions. So there's a big difference between us and chimps, and yet the kids are being taught we're 1.6% different. And that's false statement number 3. And then this one, I could not believe it when I saw this one, Haeckel's drawings. You notice the embryos on the left, they look pretty similar, and notice it doesn't on the right. It doesn't matter if you're a bird, a bunny, or a person. We're all pretty much the same. And those images are real similar to Haeckel's drawings, which were proven false 100 years ago. They were frauds back then, and what you see in the middle, that's what they actually look like. And that's, I think that might have been used to help get abortion through with Roe v. Wade. They're in the fish stage now. They're not humans. And so we need to update our textbooks, and don't believe me, go into New Scientist, how forged embryo illustrations led to drawn-out lies. It's embarrassing but true. Some of the most influential drawings in the history of biology are wrong, exaggerated to fit a thesis. And this in 1997, so almost 30 years ago. It says they still appear in reference books such as Gray's Anatomy. And although Haeckel confessed to drawing from memory and was convicted of fraud at the University of Vienna, the drawings persist. That's the real mystery. Yeah, why are those drawings still in here? I was at the fair and somebody said they should update their textbooks. And I said they're copyright 2024. They can't get any more updated than this year. And yeah, so this is Dr. Jonathan Wells. He's got a PhD in molecular and cell biology. He's from the University of California, Berkeley. And I don't know if you know about that place, but it's not a Bible college, okay? Not even close, but this is what he says.
If you go back earlier in development, the different classes of vertebrates look even more different.
According to Wells, Haeckel, and many modern textbooks, mislead students not just because of faked drawings, but because they leave out the earliest stages of embryonic development. What students are shown as the first stage of embryonic development is actually the mid-stage.
And very few textbooks show those earliest stages, and yet that's the whole point. It's the earliest stages that are supposed to be the most similar, and they're not.
And they're not. And you can check out the whole video. It's only probably 5 minutes long. It's on the Discovery Institute YouTube channel, and it's called Haeckel's Bogus Embryo Drawings. And you'll be able to hear Eugenie Scott. She was the director of the National Center for Science Education. And she said, yeah, those drawings are unreliable. They're just used because they're cheap. There's no copyright. But it does present the idea they're trying to get across. And it's like, well, if you need to lie, use false images to get your idea across, maybe your idea shouldn't be getting across. So these drawings are not accurate, number 4. And then this video, The Evolution of the Eye, and I bring this up later, it says 400 million years of evolution has been conspiring against you. Evolution conspiring against you? That's the logical fallacy of reification. That's when they try and give human attributes to something that's not even physical, like evolution. And it goes on to say, why are our eyes an engineering nightmare? They say, but herein lies the problem. Our retinas are wired backwards. See, the light has to go through all those cells to get to the photoreceptors. And what's happening is those cells are filtering out the UV light. Okay, we'll get into that. But she says, scientists haven't been able to come up with any working hypothesis as to why our retinas are set up backwards. Is that right? Really? That's a pretty bold claim. And she says, this means that nature invented the camera-like eye twice. Nature invented? Nature doesn't invent. So you have to watch out for these logical fallacies again. And they say that the octopus eye is better because it's got the sensors in the front instead of the back. But they live in the water, and the water filters out the UV light. You know, you can put the octopus on the land, he'll probably go blind. And she says, there aren't any scientifically proven positives. That's a declarative sentence. You must know everything to make that statement. And she's wrong, according to the Smithsonian. Here's why your eyes seem to be wired backward. Light passes through the nerve cells to get to the rods and cones, but that order is no mistake. You know, the glial cells did indeed create columns of concentrated light. And you can get more detailed on Medical Express, and this was almost 10 years ago. They should have known that by now. You know, why the human eyes are wired backwards. The glial cells can guide light just like fiber optic cables. Yeah, oops. And green and red are concentrated 5 to 10 times more by the glial cells, and the light was not scattered evenly, but concentrated into a few spots. Light was concentrated into these columns up to 10 times compared to the average intensity. And then it says this optimization is such that color vision during the day is enhanced, while nighttime vision suffers very little. So when they say that scientists don't have an hypothesis, that's false statement number 5. And they repeat the same thing. There aren't any proven positives. Well, we'll just call it 5 again. And so those are false. And what did Charles Darwin say? To suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I confess, absurd to the highest degree. Yeah, I agree. It's absurd to think that it got here by chance. And it goes on to say, but don't hold it against the theory. You know, it's crazy. And then this video, hominid evolution. Scientists have tracked the lineage of human evolution all the way back to lemur-like creatures. Can you test that? Can we watch a lemur turn into a human? No, that's not science, according to their definition. And this says that faced with the fact that more than 200 species of ape men have been disproved, may cause some to reasonably doubt the theory of human evolution. Yeah, I'm one of those some. Absolutely, I doubt human evolution. It may also cause some to question the capability of scientists to objectively evaluate any fossil they believe to be an ape man. Yeah, I'm part of that some too. I don't think they're objective. I think they're very biased, because you don't get money by finding monkey bones. You got to find the ape-like ancestors. And then in this section on evolutionary anthropology, it says that this Australopithecus afarensa, I think they're talking about Lucy, had an almost complete skeleton. So almost complete. This textbook from Ricori says that it was remarkably complete. So almost complete, remarkably complete. This college textbook says nearly complete. Okay, is this almost complete? Remarkably complete? Nearly complete? No, it's not. So that's false statement number 6. And so this, and what do? Do they change the evidence to fit the theory, or the theory to fit the evidence? You know, what are they going to do with Lucy's hip? See, the hip on the left is a chimp, the hip on the right is a human, and the hip in the middle is Lucy's before they manipulated it. And so let's just take a look at what they did to Lucy's hip.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bone seem to flare out like a chimp's.
It's a chimp hip.
But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Well, I hope so. If you cut it apart and put it back together the way you want it, it better look like you want it, like you designed it. So did they change the theory to fit the evidence? No. They blatantly changed the evidence to fit the theory. And I was at a kiosk next to the anthropology department, and I mentioned this to him, and she goes, "Oh, that never happened." And I said, "I got it on my computer. You want to see it?" "No. Don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's made up. I don't want to see that." And so this is manipulated evidence, and the kids are not shown this. Trust me, look, this video is not in the textbooks. I wonder why. Okay, and then they've got this history of the tree of life. See, we're a human on the right there, and then we came from something that came split off to become apes, all the way back up to that single living cell. That's not testable. That's not science. And they've got this evolution tree. You know, we broke off with something that became a starfish, and that broke off of something. We broke off of something that became insects and mushrooms and bacteria. That's not science. What's it doing in a science book? You know, and then Stephen Jay Gould, he came up with punctuated equilibrium because there wasn't any evidence for Darwinian evolution. And he says the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of fossils. And he's not the only one who says that. You know, this is Niles Ingrid, a book, Mark Pagel, he's writing this. And he's talking about, but instead of finding the slow, smooth, and progressive changes as Lyell and Darwin had expected, they find new species appearing seemingly out of nowhere and then remaining unchanged for millions of years, patterns hauntingly reminiscent of creation. Yeah, I think the evidence is pointing to a creator, and they're admitting it. And so this tree that adorns our textbooks is not accurate. Number 7. And this talks about humpback whales. There's a large body of evidence that suggests that the humpback whale is actually more closely related to hippos. Okay? And so millions of years of mutations and change have given rise to both species from a common ancestor. And so is that testable? And so they're saying mutations bring that about? What they're not telling the kids is that if you go into descentfromdarwin.org, there's over 1,000 PhDs that put their name on this list, and they could get fired for not bowing down to evolution. They sign off and they say, we are skeptical of the claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged. And there's 28 pages of PhD scientists from all over the world, a lot of prestigious universities. They doubt Darwinian evolution. And the superintendent of our school is married to our state representative. And I was able to walk out to the car with the state representative after one of these after hearing him talk. And, it's like kids need both sides, not just one. And I emailed them this link. And I asked them, hey, when kids are being taught evolution, should they be told the fact that there are 1,000 PhD scientists that doubt Darwinian evolution? And he never emailed me back, so maybe you guys can do that too. Okay, and then it says that evolution is the unifying theme in biology by most scientists. No, it's not. It's not working at all. The mutations in natural selection are falling apart. They have to come up with a third way of evolution, and we'll get to that. But what's really driving it, the biology, is epigenetics. That's the modification of gene expression rather than alternation of the genetic code itself. And ICR is doing a really good job with this, their continuous environmental tracking. And if you're not familiar with that, search Randy Galuza. Oh man, Yeah, and if you're not getting Acts and Facts, go into icr.org and sign up for Acts and Facts. It's a free newsletter that'll come, and it's really good, really good. I have a lot of respect for ICR. Because in the creation literature, there are these changes, like going from a blind a fish with eyes and pigment to a blind cave fish with no eyes and no pigment. You know, this literature and all these other creatures like snakes and lizards and other ones, guinea pigs, they have words like regulated, rapid, repeatable, reversible, targeted, predictable. And those same words are in evolution literature also. It's not blind chance. And Dr. Galuza, I really, really, really respect him. He is doing a great job at ICR. I saw him speak in Harris, Minnesota, and he referred to this study right here in Science, and he said that those fish can go from sighted fish to a blind fish in 1 generation. 1 generation. There's something inside as that fish is being developed that senses the environment and turns on and off what it's going to need. And it's just phenomenal. And again, it bothers the evolutionists so much they came up with the thirdwayofevolution.com. Yeah, they're looking for a mechanism. Other mechanisms are essential for the comprehensive understanding of evolutionary process and the alternative ideas of the evolutionary process. Why do you need alternative ideas? Well, it's because your idea doesn't work. And so they're looking for alternative ideas. And this video says that humans are animals. And I think beliefs have consequences. And as a taxpayer, that bothers me, telling our kids that they're mutated animals. And then when they shoot up the place, everybody wrings their hands, oh, what can we do, what can we do? Hey, I got an idea. Stop lying to them. Tell them the truth. Don't prop up lies to make them think that false idea. And it says, species adapt to their environment due to natural selection. Now, I think they adapt through continuous environmental tracking. So that's a misleading statement number 8. Okay, and explain the relationship between humans and mice. Boy, that's going to be an interesting assignment. And they're distantly related, and look at their genetic testing and fossils of common ancestors and comparative anatomy. All those things are wrong. I love this video, I think it was Dr. Galuza giving it too. Bats and whales have identical genes specifying echolocation. So what's the common ancestor between a bat and a whale? It's not there, not there. But they say it's got a common ancestor. No, I'd say it's a common designer. The same evidence points stronger, I believe, to a common designer rather than a common ancestor. So how do you get those things? Those are convergent evolution. That's when it explains similarities between unrelated organisms. No, I think it's a common designer. So again, this is all a belief system. They compare the bones in a human, a cat, a whale, and a bat and say they have a common ancestor. No, they have a common designer. And again, it's not science. It should not be in there. That's a belief system. And again, the bones of the whales and flippers and the human's hand show similar structure and have evolved according to the species functions. And I think it was designed. And they're teaching a belief system in science class, and kids have to realize that. And this says the concept of homology is the idea that evolution uses the same parts or the same building blocks to build different structures. Can evolution use anything? Can evolution build anything? No, that's that reification thing again. But if you replace it with creator, now it makes sense. The concept of homology is the idea that a creator uses the same parts and the same building blocks to build. Now it's logically consistent. And then it goes on and says the skeletal morphology is there, the bones are used in the same bones. And then they talk about these vestigial organs on a snake. They think snakes had legs at one time. And this spur, this little white piece right here, that's what's left of the pelvis or the hip bone of the lizard from the snake from its lizard ancestors. You know, so they think that, and those things they say they're just useless. They're vestigial. Again, that's a belief system. But if you go into creation evolution headlines, Dr. Jerry Bergman, and he's got so many articles out there, so well researched. He wrote this one, and he debunked it. He said they're useful when climbing trees, and they're useful in courtship and mating, and they only protrude at the breeding season. So they're used for breeding. They're not vestigial. And then it goes on to say about, now we're jumping into the rocks, geology. Okay, for a fossil to form, it has to undergo fast, complete burial. Okay, so a fossil to form, it's got to be buried rapidly. You know, you guys get dead deer on the side of the road down here? You know, is your ditches full of fossils? Is that going to turn into a fossil? No, it's just going to get scavenged and decompose. According to this, the only way it forms, becomes a fossil is if it's buried rapidly. Therefore, any layer of sediment that has fossils in it was laid down rapidly. And that's our whole geologic column. That's evidence for a flood, not millions of years, because it has to be laid down rapidly. It can't go down slowly, because otherwise it'll decompose. And it says that the universe sprang into existence about 13 billion years ago. Now, is that testable? No, it's not. That's a belief system. It's not science. And it said the clouds of gas and dust from the Big Bang, gravity pulled this cooling material into piles, clumping it together in dense knots. As the pressure increased, so did the temperature in these knots, and the first stars were born. Well, that violates Boyle's law, because as the volume decreases, the pressure increases and makes it spread apart. When Gary Parker was going through grad school, they were talking about this stellar, thing, and this nebular theory. And he said, well, how does that work? Because air pressure is 60 to 100,000 times stronger than gravity. And the professor just punted, he just said, well, maybe they should call it the nebulous theory instead of nebula theory, meaning hard to understand. And then it says that this hot swirling dust, Earth and other planets in our solar system condensed from this matter orbiting the sun. Well, if that's the case, they should all spin the same direction, but they don't. Venus goes backwards, Uranus is on its side. And it also, there's this thing called the aggregation problem, and that's where the things bounce apart. They don't stick together. This is from Nature. It says how this process continues from meter-sized boulders to kilometer-scale planetesimals, a major unsolved problem. Boulders are expected to stick together poorly. And so this goes on to say, a different article in Nature, objects must have grown very rapidly from sub-meter-sized pebbles into a 1,000 or 100 kilometer-sized bodies, possibly in a single leap. See, they break apart. They don't stick together. The rings of Saturn aren't turning into moons. The asteroid belts aren't turn into the planets. See, they break apart. So it falls apart right there. They can't get planets. They can't get moons or stars. And it says the Earth's oldest rock was discovered in 2008 along the Hudson Bay in northern Quebec. But in 2019, NASA came out and said the Earth's oldest rock was found on the moon. Yeah, it says that the rock crystallized about 12 miles beneath the Earth's surface. So how do you get a rock 12 miles down onto the moon? Well, the hydroplate theory explains it very well. So this thing about it being found in the Hudson Bay, that's false statement number 9. And then also up in there, they find sea plankton found in the International Space Station. How'd that get up there? And I just took this picture today at your Hastings Museum. It says that stony meteorites often closely resemble Earth rocks. Well, yeah, that's because they came from the Earth. And if you haven't heard of the hydroplate theory, you really need to check it out. That is making so many accurate predictions. And Kevin Lee, this is just a clip of the talk that he gave at Twin Cities Creation Science Association. And yeah, just listen to this. Everything that's not supposed to be up there, they're finding.
There's a strange moon of the asteroid Dinkinish. When the Lucy probe was here looking at Dinkinish, it saw this. Oh, another asteroid with a moon. And then it went a little bit further and took another angle at it. And it said, oh, it's an asteroid with a moon that is made up of two components that are contact binaries of the same size.
Thank you.
Absolutely impossible, except for the hydroplate theory. Principal investigator for Lucy said in a statement, I would have never expected a system that looks like this. In particular, I don't understand why the two components of the satellite have similar sizes. This is going to be fun for the scientific community to figure out. No, it's not going to be fun. They're never going to figure it out unless they embrace the hydroplate theory premise of how they were sent up into space. Contact binary systems seem to be fairly common. Now there's, oh yeah, this is common to find contact binaries, which was impossible to them a few years ago until they keep finding them everywhere. But scientists hadn't seen one orbiting an asteroid prior to Dinkinish, and we never suspected anything so bizarre. Details of how this unusual moon formed remain mysterious, and it will remain mysterious until people embrace Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory. They'll never figure it out. Scientists were shocked in 1993 when for the first time they saw a moon orbiting an asteroid. called Dactyl. They said it was impossible, and then they saw it. Galileo scientists correctly stated that it is virtually impossible, that the moon is a captured object, something created completely separately from light. It is impossible to catch a moon in the vacuum of space. Now, decades later, scientists have found that 17%, more than 245 asteroids have orbiting, and now a moon with the moon can only be explained by the hydroplate theory.
Yeah, I encourage you to listen to that talk. Go into TCCSA on YouTube. We broke up into shorts that are about a minute long. We put a highlight of that and listen to that, because NASA is making tremendous blunders, and they're costing us hundreds of millions of dollars because they have the wrong perspective of the past. And this is another wrong perspective. It says that the resulting heat caused Earth to be in a molten state. So the Earth was once a molten blob, and granite is an igneous rock, and igneous comes from a melt, from molten material. And that's wrong, because molten rocks form when molten material cools and hardens, and it cools slowly. And Walt Brown, and you can get this hydroplate book downloaded online. Go into hydroplate.org/HPT. You can download it for free. And on page 28, it says, had Earth ever been molten, its dense, non-reactive chemical elements, such as gold, would have sunk to the Earth's core. Gold's 70% denser than lead, yet it is found on the Earth's surface. So Earth has never been molten. And then he goes on to say that if melted granite slowly cooled, the first mineral to solidify would sink to the bottom of the melt if it were denser than the melt, or it would float to the top of the melt if it were less dense than the melt. A layer cake of minerals would form instead of granite, which is a granular mixture of minerals. Therefore, the entire Earth was never molten. That's really hard on that blind chance theory. And then Robert Gentry, he confirms it too. He wrote this book, Creation's Tiny Mysteries, where he found these polonium halos that only have a half-life of 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So like in an hour, they should all be gone. And he said it's like dropping Alka-Seltzer into a water and then finding the ice with the Alka-Seltzer bubbles still in it. And when they found out that he was finding stuff that went against their Big Bang theory, they cut his funding. And he said, hey, just prove me wrong. Just make some granite. Make some granite that has this polonium halo in it. And they can't do it. And so, yeah, well, they really have to look at these assumptions of the past. And then again, granite as an igneous rock, prove it. If it is, prove it. Make it from melt. Let's see you do it. And then the teacher's note says that convection currents are an important part of the theory of how seafloor spreading works. And that's the other thing, plate tectonics. It's like there's three big sacred cows out there. One's evolution, the other one's plate tectonics, and the other one's germ theory. And I heard of people, they want to make it illegal to criticize any of them, make it illegal to criticize those. Okay, but this convection currents, that's kind of like water boiling. It's cold, it's hot on the bottom, goes to the top, cools down, and goes round and round. Well, Dr. Walt Brown says that rock that melts under the extreme pressure under more than 220 miles below the Earth's surface will contract. And therefore, magma below this depth of about 220 miles is too dense to rise. So magma cannot circulate inside the mantle, contrary to what has been taught for 50 years. And I think this needs to be brought to this discussion. They're teaching it as a fact, but it goes against some laws of physics. So this is false statement number 11. And then we're moving on to the Big Bang. One of the biggest mysteries of the universe is how the entire universe inflated at an extremely high rate from a small point smaller than a single atom to the size of a baseball. The mystery continues to plague scientists, but the laws of physics do allow for this event. You ever seen that, Brian? The laws of physics allow for the Big Bang? I've never seen that. I mean, that's what changed Spike Pizarro's life. He asked him, how do you believe in the Big Bang and the laws of physics at the same time? And so, they do a lot of, and then, the first law of thermodynamic, matter, energy can either be created or destroyed. And so, but can only be changed from one form to another. So you can't get matter from nothing. You can't get energy from nothing. And just think of it as a rock can't make itself. And then the second law is a fire can't burn forever. Things become disordered over time. And then it says, scientists use these two laws to explain how the energy from the expansion of a singularity can form the matter in the universe. They're using those two laws. It's like, how in the world are they doing that? But here's the answer, Brian. Some have found contradictions between the law of conservation of energy and the Big Bang Theory. Would you be part of that, some? Yeah, absolutely. Since neither addresses where the singularity of condensed energy originated. However, here's how they get around it. The Big Bang Theory only refers to the time after the singularity began to expand. After the matter was made, that's when the Big Bang starts. That's like evolution. That only starts after the first living cell is formed. Well, I don't care when your theory starts. If you have a blind chance perspective of the past, you believe in miracles. You get something from nothing, that's a miracle. You believe getting life from non-life is a miracle. Getting order from chaos is a miracle. And then getting the immaterial from the physical matter, that's another miracle. That's called Einstein's gulf. How do you go from matter to ideas? It's unbridgeable, is what Einstein said. And then they talk about how scientists think that hydrogen came about, and then it cooled and turned into helium, and then it turns into lithium. And so my question at St. Cloud State one day is, did hydrogen and helium turn into people? And I did this at the fair one time, and it was clearly no. But at St. Cloud State, they're a lot more educated, so it was real close. Real close, yeah, hydrogen and helium. And I have that on my bike, too. I bike around, I park my bike there. It said, did hydrogen and helium really turn into people? And a professor walks by as my bike's there, and he goes, no, hydrogen and helium didn't turn into people. And I said, well, what did the Big Bang make? And he didn't say anything. I said, they made hydrogen, helium, and a little bit of lithium. And then he goes on and he goes, yeah, and those things turned into stars that turned into the elements that turned into people. And I forget what I said, but if that ever happens again, I'm just going to say, prove it. Let's see it. Let's see you turn hydrogen and helium into people. You know, it's a belief system about the past. And here's the evidence for the Big Bang, so you can sleep well at night tonight. The cosmic background radiation, the measurable expansion of the universe, the relative abundance of the different elements in the universe, and the known laws of physics. That's their evidence for the Big Bang. That could also be evidence for a creator. And now we're going to talk about scientific mysteries, dark matter and dark energy. Those are things that have to exist or the Big Bang falls apart. And yet none of them have been observed. And it talks about some sort of invisible matter must be out there, otherwise these stars would not continue to follow their orbits. And I think they're talking about spiral galaxies, because those things can't last millions of years because they get all wound up. And yet they need to have that dark matter so that they can still have it for millions of years. But if they're only thousands of years old, that's not a big deal. And it goes on to say that they call it dark matter, and that it makes up 23% of the universe. Okay, and then it goes on to say that the expansion of the universe provides strong evidence for the Big Bang Theory. No, it provides strong evidence for the Bible. You know, because the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and he stretched out the heavens. And that's where you get to your so-called dark energy, because it says the expansion of the universe was actually accelerating. So it's getting faster moving apart. And an unknown cosmic force that is counteracting gravity is called dark energy. No, that's God stretching out the heavens. That's what that is. And because it doesn't work into their physics at all. And that makes up 73% of the universe. So you take dark matter and dark energy, you got 96% of the universe that's not testable. It's not even observable, but they believe it. Okay, and if your theory can only explain 4% of the universe, and you're supposed to explain everything, you can only explain 4%, I think it's time to get a new theory. And then should textbooks be accurate? This is what I did at the fair, and that caused a lot of good conversations. It helps people realize that, you mean they're not accurate? And I'm here to tell you, yeah, they're not accurate. And so I took these errors and I pointed them out to our curriculum director at St. Cloud, Independent School District 742. And she got back to me and she said, we're just teaching the Minnesota State Standards. And so I went through the standards, and here they are. And they want to, they infer evolutionary relationships, all that stuff. They always point to evolution. And yet the students are supposed to be able to read and interpret multiple sources to obtain information. Well, they aren't giving them multiple viewpoints in that textbooks. They're just pounding that blind chance perspective down their throat. And I've offered to teach, show them the hydroplate. They're not interested. And then also that prove that the process of evolution primarily results from 4 factors: reproduction from a species, heritable genetic variation. This is just variation within a kind. Increased survival and reproduction, this is variation within a kind. This is not evolution. And then the common ancestry and biological evolution are supported by multiple lines of empirical evidence if you give them false information for that empirical evidence. It's not supported by that. And cosmic designer, that they don't let them think about that. And the fossil record that documents the existence, diversity, extinction, and change of life forms. Again, that's the sign of a flood. And if this is all kids learn as a blind chance perspective, all they do is memorize. They don't think. And I meet so many students at St. Cloud State, they know what to believe, or they know what to think, but they don't know how to think. And if I do find somebody who can actually think, I say, well, where'd you go to school? And 95% of the time, what do you think that is? Homeschooled. You're right. You're right. And anyhow, and then they got the thermal convection cycles. That's the standard they have to teach, even though it violates the crossover density. And then you got the stars that produce our elements. Again, that's never been observed. They got natural selection instead of continuous environmental tracking or the epigenetics. And then they got the time scale, the geologic time scale, all those millions of years that all have fossils that were all buried rapidly, but supports millions of years somehow. And then they've got, they have to bow down to the global rise in global temperature, hit that a few times. A warning climate impacts the hydrosphere, the geosphere, the biosphere, and the atmosphere. And then you got to pound climate change again and be afraid, be very afraid. And then you got to have the Big Bang coming from nothing. Construct an explanation that links astronomical evidence for the Big Bang, not a creator. And then the Earth's formation again, and from meteorites and other things, and that breaks the aggregation problem. They got problems with that. And so I contacted the curriculum director and I asked, well, what standard says we're 1.6% different from chimpanzees? And she didn't answer the question, but the school board or the superintendent emailed me and said, we're in the process of reviewing your concern and our response are they contacting the publisher so they can take down the false information? No, they're contacting response with our district's law firm. What do you have to go contact a law firm for bad information? And so I thought, well, they're not doing anything. So I went to the school board meeting, and this is what I said.
I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk. And I'm here under the assumption that everybody would like accurate textbooks. Is there anybody, oh, you guys can't. If there's anybody who opposes accurate textbooks, raise a hand. But I think we all have that in common. And so my question was going to be, if there were errors in the textbooks, what would you do? But you can't respond. And so I'm suggesting, would you contact the publisher? If the publisher had a video that said, hey, we're 1.6% different from a chimpanzee, and in 2002, PubMed said that was wrong, and that's part of the NIH. And in 2011, I think, or 10, it was Nature said that our Y chromosome is horrendously different. And then a PhD from Clemson who majored in genetics, he says, no, we're about 30% similar, or 30% different, not 1.6%. And so you could contact them and ask them if they would want to correct that. And also there was some video there that says if you got chemicals sloshing around for millions of years, it can start life, living organisms, and that goes against hydrolysis. Dr. Jonathan Safart, he explains how water breaks everything apart faster than it gets put together. And there was a NASA scientist that also reconfirmed that. And there's a video that says that our eyes are wired backwards because light has to go through these cells before it gets to the photoreceptors, and they can't figure out why. Well, actually, those cells are glial cells, and they're like fiber optics. They magnify the red and the green light, and so it gives us optimum day and night vision. And then in the textbook, it says in 2008, they found the Earth's oldest rock on the near the Hudson Bay. And in 2019, NASA came out and said that they found the Earth's oldest rock on the moon. And so these things, I think, hopefully you can contact the publisher. Hopefully these errors can be taken out before the school year starts. And then if there's anybody who's interested in how a rock could get from the Earth to the moon, there's a theory that explains a lot of this, makes accurate predictions. And I've offered it to the curriculum director, and I asked if she could talk to the science department, get it lead, because I think kids would be really excited to hear a theory that makes accurate predictions, especially how you get a rock from the Earth to the moon. And they also accurately predicted what they'd find in a comet, what they'd find, what asteroids would be composed of. And NASA their perspective of how the things formed was wrong. And so I'm just suggesting here, I'm a resource, if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, just raise a hand and I can wait for you, because I want what you guys want. I want the kids to get the best information, the most up-to-date information, and clearly there's things in our textbooks that are not accurate. And I'm just suggesting that you contact the publisher and let them know, or actually ask them, what are you basing this information on? And is it more current than what's being presented? And so I think, we could get the accurate information, because if it's in the curriculum, the teacher might use it and think it's accurate. And so I think the best thing, and we don't even have to rip up the textbooks. I mean, it's just the middle school and high school are online. You can just contact them and say, this is wrong, or could you support why you do it and show them why it looks like it's wrong? Could you just delete this video? Just take this video down, take that video down. It shouldn't be that hard, I would not think. And so that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you. I might have gone long, but I appreciate the opportunity to voice this. And again, if there's anybody who wants more information, I'd be happy, so the kids can get the information that's accurate.
Thank you. You could leave your...
Yeah, and then they asked the contact information, and none of the school board contacted me, so I emailed every one of them and asked them, did this get discussed, and what action was taken? And I got this from one of them, and they said, the superintendent let us know that you've been working on it with the curriculum director. It's like, well, if they were working with me, I wouldn't have to go to the school board meeting. And then I got another email back, and it's the exact same paragraph of what somebody else did. And it says, Dear Mr. Lauer, blah, 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 over the past months of your communication, Director so-and-so has reviewed your concerns carefully and also passed them along for review to our science lead teacher. We have prepared a response which is being reviewed by the legal counsel as Superintendent so-and-so shared with you. And just, it starts out over the past months and it ends shared with you. Look at this paragraph from somebody else. It's identical. They're getting the talking points, and so it's like, well, they're not going to do anything. So I went back 2 weeks later, and this is what I said.
All right, I'm Brian Lauer, and I came here a couple of weeks ago, and I had the assumption that we all want accurate textbooks. And I'm not so sure about that, because as far as I know, the errors are still in the textbooks. 6 weeks ago, I contacted the curriculum director on July 23rd, and I pointed out some errors. And I gave her government documents that show this is false information. And I asked her if she could contact the publisher so we could take down this false information before the school year started. Well, that didn't happen. So I came here 2 weeks ago and asked the board, could you contact the publishers and let them know about this information that's questionable? Well, that didn't happen. We're supposedly waiting for some law firm to do something. And I'm not sure why we contacted a law firm. Why didn't we just pick up the phone and call customer service and say, you have a video that says we're 1.6% different from chimpanzees. And according to PubMed and Nature, that's not right. What are your sources? And another video that says that our eyes are wired backwards. It would be more logical if we had octopus eyes. And that's been debunked by the Smithsonian. And another video says that if you have chemicals sloshing around for millions of years, they can lead to living organisms. And that can't happen because of hydrolysis. And there's a NASA scientist that verifies that. And then there's another video that shows an image of embryos. And it doesn't matter if you're a bird, a bunny, or a person, but the embryos are all pretty much the same. And those images are real similar to Haeckel's fake drawings, which were proven frauds 100 years ago. Could you double check these images and make sure that they're what you're presenting? And then there's, in the textbook it says that the Earth's oldest rock was found in 2008 near Hudson Bay, but in 2019, NASA said they found the Earth's oldest rock on the moon. So there's some errors in the textbooks. And the bad thing is, the school year has started. So now this information is in the textbooks, and the kids could be taught false information in St. Cloud and around the country, whoever's using that curriculum. And so it bothers me, and I hope it bothers you enough to contact the publishers and just let them know about this false information. They might thank you because they might not be aware of it. And it's, I'll help you. I emailed every one of you. You should have my email address because I really want accurate information in the textbooks. And if it doesn't bother you, And you have no problem having false information in the textbooks, and you don't warn the parents or the teachers or the students until this false information is taken down. That's getting real close to knowingly lying to students. And I don't think that attitude should be tolerated. And I hope that's not, I'm assuming there's nobody in the room like that. And I hope there isn't anybody in the room like that. But if there is, that person should be reprimanded or voted out at the next election. So again, I think we need accurate textbooks, and I hope that you act on this. Thank you.
Yeah, so then
Thank
I
you.
emailed the curriculum director and I asked her if that video was still up
Would
because
anybody else like to participate?
because I don't have any access to the books anymore. And then I asked her if the teachers have been informed not to use it, and if not, why not? And she never responded. But I got something from the superintendent the next day, and it says basically that this concern has been resolved. They're considering it resolved, keeping the errors in the textbooks. And then they did a bunch of word salads saying stuff, and that's despicable. I just can't imagine that. And they say that, well, kids can consider multiple options, multiple viewpoints, but they're not in the textbooks. It's just a blind chance perspective. So to summarize real quickly, false statement number 1 had to do with water equal life. It does not, and what doesn't turn into living organisms, and that it doesn't replicate, and that we're not 1.6% different than chimps, and those embryos are frauds. And scientists do have a reason for why our eyes are backwards, so they say, and that the skeleton is not nearly complete or almost complete, and there's no evidence for these trees of life. And this is a misleading statement about natural selection, and this is a false statement about where they found the Earth's oldest rock, and as convection currents cannot work because of the crossover density, and granite's never been molten. And so the people in charge don't want things to change because they got the power. And we've seen this happen in history. But Walt Brown says, widespread belief systems seldom change when frequently reinforced by influential institutions such as universities, media, religious institutions, and scientific and intellectual elite. Yeah, they don't want things to change. They got the power. But when a vast number of people realize they've been misled, an intellectual revolution begins. That's what I'm trying to do. Get a vast number of people to realize, hey, the emperor has no clothes. I'm not playing that game anymore. There's no evidence for evolution. And you can sign up for academicfreedompetition.com. You can sign that so they get more academic freedom. And here's a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I think he's the guy who wrote Gulag Archipelago. But he says, when one person stands up to lies or oppression, others can become emboldened to do the same. His basic advice is to simply not to participate with lies and to refuse to speak what one does not believe. And sometimes it takes a single person to stand firm before others will do the same. And the only way they control us is the only way they oppress us is with our cooperation. So let's stand up, and maybe other people will stand up. And they try and say that we're the fringe, where the creationists are the fringe, but this is a 2019 Gallup poll. It says 40% of Americans believe that God made man in his present image less than 10,000 years ago. So we're mainstream. We're the majority. And 33% believe that God made man over millions of years. And then only 22% believe that God came about over millions, or man came about without God. So they're taking the majority's tax money, 73% of us believe in God, and teaching the minority's religion or belief system. And so I do this at the college or at the fair too. How did people get here? Blind chance or a creator? And it's 139 to 17. And so what has been done? It could be, what can we do? It's like, what's already been done? I've had a booth at the fair to shine light on this, talk to people. We gave it a talk at our creation club at the public library. It's on my YouTube channel. I was on Kent Hovind's podcast. I was on Real Science Radio podcast.
So let me know.
Oh, yeah, I don't have time to show that clip, but you should check that one out too. It's called NASA Confirms the Bible. Yeah, and so, I don't know. Do you guys want to see that? No. What? Okay, here we go. And you'll love the expressions. I'm going a little bit late. Watch the guy in the bottom right.
So let me know what you think. This is the most insane space news in a really long time. This asteroid, called Bennu, is 63 million kilometers away. That's 160 times farther than the moon is. Over the last few years, this spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx traveled all the way there, touched its surface, grabbed a sample, and brought it all the way back to Earth. And what they found in that sample is insane. It's rich in carbon, nitrogen, and organic compounds, all of which are essential to life as we know it, but we've seen that before. The asteroid is also covered in a mineral called serpentine, which looks like this. And these samples look just like the type of rock that we find here in mid-ocean ridges. This is where the stuff from the mantle of the Earth comes up and touches the water. It's underwater. Scientists think that this asteroid could be a chunk of an ancient small ocean world. This could be a piece of an old watery planet that's been traveling through space for billions of years, and we just took a sample of it.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
Wow. Oh my goodness. She needs a raise for mowing around.
We have a few minor tweaks for. First of all, that watery planet, let's call it Earth, as Kevin Lee likes to say.
What everyone just saw on display was an example of a victim of the government schools, a victim of the deceptions and the errors that Brian has uncovered. That girl, to not even consider that this giant water planet is Earth, but that it's been traveling through space for millions of years, is because she has been victimized by exactly what Brian's been uncovering. And it's actually sad. It's sad to see, but it is instructive as to the work we have to do.
Yeah, we got the high ground. We got the hydroplate, and that's hitting the ball out of the park all the time. And we've got a PhD scientist at the university, or at the Air Force Academy, who's pounding this drum. We got a lot of the high ground. We just have to organize and start making more of an impact. And I got a creation club. She said that it's been resolved. It's like, well, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. We'll see what the voters have to say, And I'll be going back there again, trust me. But I helped a student start a creation club at St. Cloud State. And today they had a table. I'm not there, but they had a table that's representing the creation club. And that's what I like to do when I go places. I like to start creation clubs. And they called me the Johnny Appleseed of creation when I was in Virginia. And again, should false information be removed from our textbooks? We talk about that. I'm trying to start one at our community college in town. And I also gave a creation tour at Como Zoo just last month. Never done it before. And so I'm so experienced, I showed Roger and Dave how to do one at the Hastings Museum. So hopefully you can get a creationist perspective at that museum. It's really, really nice. And my suggestion is go into my YouTube channel, like it, subscribe to it, and then watch, start with 101, and then 104 is really good, and then 108 is what we just covered. So are there any, thank you so much for your attention, I guess. Does anybody have any questions? Any concerns, any comments? Oh, I put them down there. Yes, you can just shout it out.
Just mention that one of the last technology conferences I went to, there was a speaker who, kind of tongue-in-cheek, was showing us how to avoid the appearance of making a mistake or to make what they were saying.
Well, what's the question? What's the question? This is Q&A time. What's the question?
It wasn't a question, it was
Okay.
just an observation after watching
Okay.
what you were showing there.
Okay.
Is it working now?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was humorously commenting that one of the last pathology conferences I went to, we had a speaker who was, again, humorously, I hope, or maybe more seriously, showing us how to look smarter than we really were. And part of the advice he gave us was, and he said he does this for all of his residents in training, he tells them whenever you give a measurement for something, don't use a whole number. use a decimal, and
Sure.
never have it end in 0 or 5.
Sure. Yep.
So I just noticed that the age of the Earth used to be 4.5 billion years.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's 4.55 to 4.6 billion years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe they went to the same workshop.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Bob Enyart, he's given them, he's offered, it's like, what's that last decimal point for? How did you figure that out? Yeah, and they can't answer. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Okay, so I'm going to expose my dumbness here. Can you please explain what the hydroplate theory is?
Yeah,
I
I can.
taught plate tectonics for years.
Yeah, well, there's a book on the back, 20 Reasons to Question Plate Tectonics. And the hydroplate, real quickly, it's it's all encompassing. The one assumption for the hydroplate is half the water was inside the earth at one time. Okay, half of the ocean was inside the earth, and it's 60 miles deep under granite. So think of the earth as a big apple. The crust is 60 miles thick, and then there's a layer of water made of about a mile thick, and then there's basalt under that. And the granite and the basalt are touching at certain places. Okay, that's the one assumption. And then the moon stretches and compresses. The gravity pulls on the earth, stretch and compress, and it heats it up. Water gets hotter and hotter and hotter. It wants to boil, but it can't because there's no room to expand. Okay, so now at 705 degrees and 3,200 psi, it becomes supercritical water, where it's not really water and it's not really steam, but whatever it is, it dissolves things like crazy. So now it's dissolving the granite above and the basalt below, and it's making elements here like limestone and salts and silicas. That's where we get a lot of the salt, by the way. And then the crust gets weaker and weaker and hotter, and finally it cracks. And there's so much pressure under there, 372,000 psi just explodes out of there, rips the crust in two directions, and it goes around and comes back on itself. And the water erupts, the tremendous force. That's how it could rain 40 days and 40 nights after the flood. And then people say, well, if that really happened, wouldn't it leave a mark on the earth? And it did. It's the mid-oceanic ridge. Okay, that's what was at the bottom of that crack. So now you got two 60-mile cliffs that are eroding away. That's where we get our sedimentary rock, granite and basalt, getting wider and wider and wider. And now there's nothing pushing down on the mantle, so now the mantle bulges, and now the continents start sliding. So you got North America and South America going to the west, and Europe and Asia, Africa going to the east, and they keep going until they run out of water or meet resistance, and then they buckle up and form mountains. Okay, and the mountains are a big mass on a small base, so they sink in. Plateaus rise up next to them. Okay, and then some of this stuff, and that's just the tip of it. It goes on and on. But for this conversation, some of that stuff was going up with such tremendous force it escaped Earth's gravitational pull. And so you got this frozen carbon dioxide out there, which is dry ice and water and rocks. And some of those, they're like dirty snowballs. What's a dirty snowball in space? A comet, exactly right. That's why Kevin Lee was able to talk to the NASA scientist in charge of the Stardust mission 20 years ago and accurately predict what he'd find in that stardust. And he said, you're going to find stuff from the Earth. Dr. Brownlee says, no, we're going to find stuff from the Oort cloud, and he was shocked to find stuff from the Earth. And then just recently, he made a prediction about the comets. He emailed them in 2016 and said, if you try to redirect a comet, that's what the DART mission was, but they hadn't even come up with it yet, but he knew that they might. He said, it'll work if it's a solid rock, but if it's a bunch of boulders, which is what the hydroplate predicts, it's going to fail. And it failed. And that's what his talk was on just last month at the Twin Cities Creation Science Association. He talked about all their blunders and how they think it's going to be a rock and it's not, and then it blinds their camera so they don't get any data, and they keep repeating their ignorance. So in a nutshell, that's the hydroplate. It's another way of looking at the Earth. It's another perspective of the past that makes accurate predictions. Because if we have a blind chance perspective of the past, our predictions are always wrong. But if you have a creation perspective, and specifically the hydroplate, now we've got a lot of scientific clout. And I've got you should grab one of my cards, because I've got a whole playlist just on the hydroplate. And we had our very first conference last year, and we had 3 PhDs speak, and one of them was a professor of astronautics at the U.S. Air Force Academy. And I went into St. Cloud State's office to say, hey, you guys want to see this theory? Maybe they watched it online, I don't know, but they never contacted me. And the lack of curiosity at St. Cloud State Science and our public school science director just is shocking to me. Wouldn't you want to see a theory that makes accurate predictions? And nobody does, and they don't. So that's the hydroplate in a quick nutshell. Anybody else have a question or a comment or a concern? Why don't they want to? There's a lot of ways to go at that. A lot of them get their power and prestige and money from evolution being true. And if they do, they don't even want to look at it. That's the weird thing. They don't want to know they're wrong. They don't want to have that cognitive dissonance knowing that they're teaching something that's false. They just would rather not know about it. Because if a theory, the hydroplate, and it's got some biblical support for it, that should destroy the Big Bang. And I think, if you know on the book, I got some books on the table where if you go against the consensus, you're going to get fired. And they may not want to know, but it's holding science back. And that's, again, why I'm going to the court of public opinion. I'm going to you guys. You guys think for yourself. You take a look at both perspectives, and hopefully people will check out your curriculum here and start having conversations, because that's going to be my next time. It's like, it's a really bad look to allow errors in our textbooks. Voters might want to know about that. Parents might want to homeschool because of that. And, you might want to not have that on your record that you allowed errors in the textbook, because we could get a whole new school board and you could be fired, hopefully, or reprimanded. Yes. Oh, somebody's watching online? Hey, good on you.
I don't know, can you read that?
Welcome to Life Chant. Could natural selection be a mechanism that God used to create all life? Like a sculpture starts with a chunk of clay and can make art. Well, natural selection can explain the survival of the fittest, but it cannot explain the arrival of the fittest. You need to have something to select. You need to have organisms to select. You need to have animals so they can select, but they can't. You can't get life from non-life. And they asked Dr. Richard Dawkins, he was on camera. You can check this out somewhere, from Frog to Prince, I think is the video. But somebody asked Richard Dawkins, how do you add information to the genome? What's the mechanism that adds information to the genome? And he sat there for 18 seconds. That's a very uncomfortable pause. And then he's looking up, and then he said, stop recording. Yeah, so you can see that online. And so we have the high ground. We're making accurate predictions. We have the truth. It's clear, at least in St. Cloud, they don't mind teaching kids lies or having lies available. And so that should be pretty easy to vote out, I would think. And now, next week, I'm going to miss the next school board meeting because I'm going to a fundraiser for a candidate, House of Representative, and there's going to be a legislator there. So I'm going to talk to the legislator. These people don't want accurate textbooks. What do you think we can do? I'd like to see it a campaign issue. Do you want accurate textbooks? Because when I was at the fair, somebody walked by and said, is this a Republican thing? It's like, you mean accurate information is Republican? Does that mean deceptive information is Democrat? And I'd love to see this be a campaign issue. I'd love to see the heat turned up on the school boards. I really would. And the state school board. Why do you have these? What? Pardon me?
We took it to the governor in Texas.
Good. You took it to the governor in Texas.
Several years ago.
There we go.
Several years ago, there was a problem with the educational system in Houston, one that we recognized.
Yeah.
A lot more, I'm sure. But Governor Bush, at that time, was running for office, and he was looking for something that would be catchy.
Yeah.
People want their kids to be taught the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
You find a parent that says, oh, I'd like for my child to be taught a lie, you found an idiot.
Yeah.
He needs to go down to the local zoo and enter himself there.
Yeah.
But anyhow, one of Bush's aides found this problem going on in Houston and took it to Governor Bush, and he put it on his campaign mode.
Good.
And really turned things upside down in Houston.
Good. So it worked.
Yeah.
Good. It worked. Yeah, praise the Lord for that. Yes.
How many different textbooks did you survey in order to find those 11? Were there more than just 11 mistakes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's probably 2 or 3 dozen of them. I got a list of them over there. Oh, yeah. How many books did I look at? Was there more than just 11? Okay. Well, I started out looking, I went to the public library and looked at what they had, and I went to the college to look at what they had in their library, and I took a bunch of pictures. And then I went to the high school, and I saw the grade school ones, and they're promoting that stuff too. And then at the high school one was copyright 2024, I think it was Discovery Education. And they don't have textbooks there, they have, everything's online, so they gave me the passcode. And so I went through that, and yes, there's probably 36 things that are either outdated, wrong, or misleading. And I was just working on these. I was like, well, if they aren't going to do these. So yeah, that's what I looked at, and they're copyright 2024. Somebody at the fair said, oh, they should update the textbooks. And I said, well, they can't get any more update than this. And so they're using outdated information to talk to the kids, to teach the kids a blind chance perspective of the past. They aren't using the more up-to-date information that shows it's wrong. And they're not doing anything about it. That was pretty surprising for me, you know, because I'm going to go in there and it's like, you know, I had the assumption that everybody wanted accurate textbooks. I was wrong. You know, and the school board, are you going to be a school board that's going to allow bad information to be taught to our kids? You know, I think the taxpayers and the parents and the legislators would be very interested in why. And so I'm still here to help. You know, it's not too late. But we'll see. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that amino acids, when you talk about primordial soup,
yeah.
When you have amino acids form, they can form into left and to right-hand forms.
Right.
According to, you know, living organisms, they require the left-hand form.
Right.
So, if, you know, randomly, they should be equal. The problem is that the right-hand form would be detrimental and would basically kill the organ, you know.
Well, yeah, that's
so
why.
It has to be all left-hand.
Right.
And if, you know, with 50-50, you can't have a living
Right.
organism.
Right. Yeah, and that's why the Urey experiment, they had a trap. They had a trap to funnel it out because the energy would break it apart the next time through. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with the science book, and if they would just stick to the definition of science, teach what's testable, I got no problem. But they're teaching a blind chance perspective of the past, which is a belief system that eliminates God. And that's probably why there's so much resistance, and that's probably why they don't want to look at it. I don't know. But they eliminate the Creator, and yet most of our sciences were started by people who believed in the Creator, biblical, and the Bible. But any other questions, concerns? Yes?
When I was teaching science, it was California and Texas that
Yep.
basically dictated the selection of science textbooks throughout the whole nation. Is that still the case?
I think so. I think it's mainly Texas. That's what comes about. But you know, the question was, when she was teaching, it was California and Texas. Those dictated what's in the textbooks. And that, I think, you know, Texas for sure. But you should still be able to update them. You should still be able to take out bad information. You know, my thing was, why not just call customer service and tell them they're wrong, or ask them why this old information is in there? But they didn't even contact them. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with our state standards. You saw some of those standards, and it's you gotta teach evolution. And so the textbooks people, they might look at the state standards and design the book for that. So I think that we need to defund the Department of Education and defund the state state education department, and let the highest authority be in the school be the school board, because the school board is typically made of parents, and they're going to have to live with their decisions. But when it goes to, and that's how it was when Ron Paul was a kid, the school board was the highest authority, then it went to the school district, and then it went to the state, and now it's the DC with the Department of Education in the 70s, and there's not one metric that got better since they've taken charge. So it's time to defund it and save us some money. Because there's not one parent who wants his daughter showering with a boy. That's coming out of DC. That's not coming out of a school board. You know, but I digress. Any other questions or comments? Wow, great. Let's close in prayer real quick. Dear, or did you want to do that?
You go ahead.
Okay, dear Heavenly Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus, and we do thank you so much for this time to expose the errors in the textbooks. We thank you for all the people that took time out of their lives to come and hear it. and learn it, and we pray that you would bless their efforts as they try to expose it and find out what their school is teaching, what their tax money is buying. And we do pray that people would rise up and run for the school board. It's not a fun thing to be at, but we need them, and that they would be supported and that the truth would prevail. And for those people who like supporting errors, I pray that they would be reprimanded or voted out. And we pray a special blessing on these people. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, Brian, so good to have you here. It's really nice to have a speaker in person. We've had so many online ones. So thank you for driving down from St. Cloud and for being a part of the Great Plains Genesis Forum.
My pleasure.
Pray your
Anytime.
blessing on your return trip. Maybe,
anytime. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I'll be at the table in the back if you have any personal questions.